So we have been seeing how face to face divine Savitri and death were standing and arguing against each other, and ultimately how she vanquished him. A kind of an advanced description of this event we already see right at the beginning of the epic. In Canto 2 of Savitri, the book of the beginning, the issue. Let us read a few lines connected with this from this canto. We have this description here. First, about the difficulty of nature, what was coming, the way of changing the nature, what had got to be done, and how Savitri rose to the occasion. She faced the engines of the universe. A heart stood in the way of the driving wheels. A heart stood in the way of the driving wheels. This is a direct reference to death. The engines of the universe, the law which is operating in the present context in the universe, the orderer of the world, that is death, it is he who stood in the way of the driving wheels of Savitri. A giant working paused in front of a mind, stark conventions with the frame of a soul. A magic leverage suddenly is caught that move the veiled formidable, that move the veiled infable's timeless will. What is the magic leverage? It is a prayer, a master act, a king idea. It could be a prayer which is a master act and which is also a king idea. It could be a prayer as a part of the master act and king idea. It could be the king idea made up of prayer and master act. It could be bhakti, it could be karma, it could be jnana. All these together or individually, one supporting the other, it is they who are now forming a leverage for Savitri's action. A prayer, a master act, a king idea can link man's strength to a transcendent force. That is what Savitri did. Her master act was to enter into the house of meditation and identify her will with the will of the Supreme. That is the master act. That is also the prayer. That is also the king idea. And it is with that her strength was linked at once to the transcendent force. The mighty mother who is supervising all these actions of us from above. Then miracle is made the common rule, and that is exactly what happened. Once that identification is there, then all actions appear like miracle. All now seems nature's massed machinery, an endless servitude to a material rule, and long generations rigid chain. Her firm and changeless habits, aping law, an empire of unconscious deaf device, another the claim of man's free human will. This is what nature does. Man's free will is annulled by nature, by law. He too is a machine, amid machines. He becomes a slave. But with that master act came idea, a prayer, wisdom comes, and vision grows within. Then nature's instrument crowns himself a king. He feels his witnessing self and conscious power. His soul steps back and sees the light supreme. Now this is the general description of man when the liberate is caught. But this is something more than that in the case of Savitri. What happened in the case of Savitri? A goddess stands behind the brute machine. This truth broken in a triumph of fire. A victory was won for God in man. Savitri has won the victory for God in man. The deity reveals his hidden face. The great War Mother now in her rose. A living joy's river's face, cold, dead turn, affirm the spirit's tread on circumstance. Press back the senses' dire revolving wheel and stop the mute march of necessity. A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, empowered to hold the door, denied and closed. Smooth from death's visage is done absolute, and burr the bounds of consciousness and time. So this is kind of an advanced description of the event that takes place almost at the end of the epic. The vanquishing of death by Savitri has already been described right at the beginning of Savitri. A goddess stands behind the brute machine. This truth broken in a triumph of fire. A victory was won for God in man. The deity reveals his hidden face. The great World Mother now in her rose. A living choice reverse face cold, dead turn. Affirm the spirit's tread on circumstance. Press back the senses' dire revolving wheel and step the mute march of necessity. A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, empowered to fold the door denied and closed. Smoke from death's visage is done absolute, and burr the bounds of consciousness and time. Smoke from this visage is done absolute. Now this is exactly the kind of description which we have been receiving in the confrontation of Savitri with death. Ultimately what happens? A victory was won for God in man. The deity reveals his hidden face. How? We had later on the description, transfigured was a formidable shape. Death was standing in front of Savitri. He was transfigured. Transfigured was a formidable shape, abolishing forever and dissolving the mystery of his high and violent deeds. his head and his face, transfigured for the formidable shape. And then again, a great world mother now in her arose. When Savitri stood in a full power with the descent of the Mahakundalini in various centers of her subtle body, she was in a full power. And then a mighty transformation came on her. The incarnation thrust aside its veil. This is what we have got toward the end of this Savitri's confrontation with death. And in the beginning we have the great World Mother now in her arose. A mighty transformation came on her. The incarnation thrust aside its veil. And then again we have parallel description. Here we have a flaming warrior from the eternal peaks. So that is Savitri, the incarnate in her full fiery strength, standing in front of death. A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks. The power, the presence came down into her various centers. Here, heart, lower down, below. All the subtle physical chakras were completely filled with the presence and the power. A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, the power, the presence came down into her centers. Thus changed, she waited for the word. The Mahakundalini, the divine power, the divine Shakti has entered into all the active centers of Savitri, and yet now she is waiting for the word, for the command to do her work. What is the work she has to do? She smiles from death's visage, is dumb, absolute. The visage which was wearing, the Supreme was wearing, it is that which is removed. Smoke from death's visage is dumb, absolute. His body was eaten by light. His spirit devoured. The diagnosis shadow disappeared. So we have in the beginning, smoke from death's visage is dumb, absolute. We have to the end, his body was eaten by light, his spirit devoured. The dire universal shadow disappeared. And then finally, one whom her soul had faced as death and night, one whom her soul had faced as death and night, a sum of all sweetness gathered into his limbs. He was totally transformed. A sum of all sweetness gathered into his limbs. So the death's visage is torn, is smitten, and what you see here is the real Supreme who had put on the mask of death for a certain purpose, and now that has been removed. So Savitri is in a position now to see the real meaning behind one who stood in front of her as a denier of the divine law. No, it is a mask. It has a certain purpose. It is meant for a certain functional aspect to be played out in the scheme of manifestation. That is over. And now things can move on in a different direction. Actually, this discussion tells us very well what we have seen earlier also. So let us read this passage again and check the connotations which are parallel in both the places. A Godhead stands behind the brute machine, this truth broken in a triumph of fire. A victory was won for God in man. Won for God in man. Not for man, but for God in man. The true divinity which has taken the human shape, it is for him that Savitri has won the victory. It is not for man, the human, but for God who is in the human. A victory was won for God in man. The deity revealed his hidden face. A sum of all sweetness gathered into his limbs. A deity revealed his hidden face. That is the hidden face which was there behind death, who was standing in front of Savitri. The great World Mother now in her rose, a living choice reverse, face cold death turn. I found the spirit's tread on circumstance, press back the senseless dire revolving wheel, and stop the mute march of necessity. If flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, empowered to force the door denied and closed, smoke from death's visage is done absolute, and blur the bounds of consciousness and time. Well, that is what we have been seeing all along, that finally, ultimately, Savitri has cut a door to the Supreme through the void. That is the most unique kind of a thing she has done. People have reached the transcendental Supreme by crossing the doors of immortality, from mortality to immortality. But by crossing the doors of the void, none has done that. And Savitri is the only person who has achieved that miracle. In fact, it is only in that miracle, in that accomplishment, in that siddhi of her mission, that the true nature of this creation is seen. What we have been calling life and death. They are not really life and death. There is a certain consciousness behind life and death. It is that consciousness which is coming out in its full power, in its proper intensity, in its perfect dimension for the play or the manifestation which must take place here. And that is the work for which Savitri had incarnated, and that is what she has achieved. In which time? In the occult time. In the earthly time, it is a process which has been set into motion, and it is that which will happen as things move on, as we also get ready more and more to receive this power, as we open ourselves more and more to what she has done for us. But as far as the occult action is concerned, the job is done. Savitri has completed her work. She has succeeded fully. She has vanquished death. She has cut a door to the void. She has opened the gateway to the Supreme. And now it is the Supreme himself who is spreading back onto the earth. That is what we have in the end of this epic. That is what is described right in the beginning, in the issue, Canto 2 of Savitri. At times people say that Canto 1, December Dawn, and Canto 2, the issue, are a kind of a flashback for the development of the epic. As if the story is told in advance, and then all the threads are gathered and the fabric is one, woven. Well, it could be that it is a flashback, a kind of a technique the author has used, the poet has adopted, for highlighting certain aspects of his literary creation. That is definitely a possibility. But for a natural epic, spontaneous epic like Savitri, that would look kind of artificial, made up, prepared, to a certain extent even mental. That is not the case in Savitri, for Savitri. What we could say is that what is described in the first two cantos, the symbol dawn and the issue, is an event which is taking place already right at the beginning of things, at this very initiation of the process of evolution in the transcendent. All these things are happening in the transcendent, and it is these which will have to work themselves out in the process of evolution on the earth. How are they going to be worked out? Yes, the Divine Mother will incarnate herself here as Savitri and do all that. For the incarnation of the Divine Mother on earth, a sufficient ground has to be prepared, an adhara has to be built for a mighty action, and the yogic adhara, the yogic support which is required for that action is prepared by the yoga tapasya of Ashwapati. So Ashwapati comes here, does the yoga tapasya, the Divine Mother incarnates, and finally she vanquishes death, who was standing across the path of the divine event. In other words, all this is only foreseen up there above, and things are now set into motion by the incarnation of Ashwapati and the incarnation of Savitri, and finally death is vanquished, the path is cleared, and a new manifestation, the proper creation from this point onward can begin.